great pleasure of being a friend of John Brown, just as many of you in this room do as well. My name is Joe Bill Wiley. John and I became friends at the Columbia Club. Spent many times in the fitness room together, and some of you might not believe it, but an occasional drink in the third floor bar. And through that, I've gotten to know this man very well, and I've kind of adopted him as my grandfather. Through a random series of events, we kind of find ourselves here today. I think that everybody in this room knows that John Brown's a hero. Today we're here to officially recognize that. Back in April of 2010, a good friend of mine, Mark Slady, came down for the NCAA basketball tournament and happened to come by the Columbia Club. And through that encounter, Mark was able to meet John Brown. Mark is a young guy who really enthusiastically supports the members of the military. He started a foundation in Illinois called the Illinois Patriot Education Fund in 2010, and it provides scholarships for Illinois military families, particularly those who were either killed or injured in the conflicts of both Iraq and Afghanistan. Mark took a particular interest in John, and Mark holds a fundraiser every year to raise money for his foundation, and invited John and Nancy to attend. Through that, he met Colonel Tom Netley, who is Mark's future father-in-law. At dinner, they talked. Colonel Netley was able to learn more about John's service in World War II. He has a particular interest in that, and he offered to write a book for John's family, documenting that service. And so in that research that he was doing for the book, it was discovered that John Brown was eligible for a Bronze Star. So it's my pleasure to introduce Colonel Tom Netley to continue with this ceremony. Colonel Netley joined the Army in 1964 as a private. After 3 years of enlisted service, then Sergeant Netley attended Infantry Officer Candidate School at Fort Benning, Georgia, and was commissioned as a second lieutenant. His first assignment was with the 7th Infantry Division in Korea. In 1969, he served with the 4th Battalion, 21st Infantry, along the Cambodian and Laotian borders. His combat awards include 3 Bronze Stars, 4 Air Medals, a Purple Heart, and the Combat Infantryman's Badge. After Vietnam, he was assigned to the 3rd Infantry Division in Europe, and during the early 1980s, commanded the 2nd Battalion, AIT, right here in Indianapolis at Fort Benjamin, Harrison. He retired in 1989 as the Deputy Chief of Staff, United States Army War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. He lives in Tucson, Arizona with his wife Linda, who is with us here today. They have 2 children, Sergeant Tom Jr., who is a Pennsylvania State Police officer, and his daughter Dana, who is also with us here today. So, Colonel Netley.
Thank you, Mr. Wiley, for those kind remarks. Governor Daniels, General Umbarger, General Goodwin, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. The book Warrior is a story of Private First Class John Charles Brown, the 328th Infantry Regiment and the 26th Infantry Division. The book begins at the end of World War I and attempts to capture the times, the Roaring '20s, the Great Depression, and how our country attempted to remain neutral in the conflicts that raged in both Europe and elsewhere. The book describes a world at war, identifies the battlefield commanders who fought the war, and the impact of their decisions on a young man from Indiana. It follows John's footprints through 199 days of combat. After our dinner conversation in Chicago, I wanted to learn more about John Brown and the Battle of the Bulge. I wanted to look at why former soldiers of old blood and guts pattern, like John Brown, always seem to stand a bit taller, square away their shoulders, and with that twinkle in his eye, tell you I served with General George S. Patton in the famous 3rd United States Army. They may have said that a bit differently in 1944 when they were going through it. But today they know that they were part of something special, very special. They are immensely proud, as they should be, of their service with arguably America's greatest battlefield commander. John, like millions of others, answered his country's call for service, and after an appropriate training here in the United States, was ordered to the European theater of operation. On September the 7th, 1944, John and his regiment arrived on Utah Beach, Normandy. They were urgently needed replacements to fill combat losses sustained during the D-Day invasion 3 months earlier and the heavy fighting that had followed. The Allied invasion forces had moved so swiftly they had outrun their supplies and had paused for a final push into Berlin. The men were exhausted. Units were in desperate need of replacements. The Allied commanders believed they were facing an exhausted and demoralized opponent. Hitler was about to demonstrate otherwise. Meanwhile, George Patton and the 3rd Army was positioned in the Vosges Mountains in southern France. John and the 26th Infantry Division were a part of that 3rd Army and were located in Metz, France, for rest and re-outfitting. December 16, 1944. It was snowing heavily on December 16, 1944, when 250,000 German soldiers, along with their supporting Panzer tanks and heavy artillery, attacked 83,000 Americans in the Ardennes forest. The Americans were caught totally by surprise. Some units were overrun. Some units were surrounded. Some units surrendered. But most stood and fought in the cold, bitter winter weather, outnumbered, outgunned, and without any armor or air support. Ladies and gentlemen, the Battle of the Bulge had begun. That evening, General George Patton, recognizing the rapidly developing disaster, called General Omar Bradley on the phone and said, "Brad, I've started the 4th Armored Division North, and I have 2 of my best divisions ready to go." One of those divisions was John Brown's 26th Yankee Division. A few days later, PFC John Brown and the 328th Infantry Regiment crossed the line of departure and began moving north, providing flank security to the 4th Armored Division in its attempt to break the siege at a village known as Bastogne. We all know the outcome of the Battle of the Bulge. It has been well documented in both print and film. However, what escapes most Americans today are the losses that were sustained in this battle, in what would become the bloodiest battle fought by U.S. forces during World War II. We lost 90,000 casualties. The term Battle of the Bulge is really a misnomer, since it implies a single battle. Instead, the Battle of the Bulge was anything but. It was a series of individual skirmishes fought by desperate men in a very desperate and life-threatening situation. It is a story of individual courage and determination under the most challenging of battlefield conditions. For those that were there, no explanation is necessary. For those that were not, no description, no words of the suffering and condition these men faced is sufficient. After the Battle of the Bulge, John Brown and his fellow Yankee Division soldiers fought across Belgium, Luxembourg, Germany, Austria, and India.